Well, welcome everyone to Frontlines. This is a live webinar for those who are on the front lines of ministry. We here at Restoration Counseling love being able to provide you with resources to help you stay on the front lines and to equip you for the work that you're facing, especially when it comes to the areas of counseling or mental health or any of those kinds of things. So Frontlines is a monthly offering that we offer here at Restoration for you. Today, we're going to be talking about suicide, one of the most talked about issues, increasing issues in our world today, and especially in our country. And so we wanted to take some time to equip you for how to walk with people who are in seasons of suicidal crisis. So to begin, I want to let you know that the slide deck for this is available to you in a PDF form. You should be able to get that from restorylabs.com. The recording is going to be available as well on our YouTube channel, and there is closed captioning available for those of you who would like it. Just go ahead and click on that closed captioning button at the bottom of the screen. So I want to start here just in sharing my screen and getting into some of the guidelines that we have for you. My name is Chris, and I'm a licensed professional counselor here at Restoration. And this issue is one of the hardest ones to face. It is literally life and death. And so whether it's the first time that you've walked through this with someone, or this is something that you have yet to do, or you've done this many times before, it doesn't get easier. And I think one of the things that we really want to do is to help equip you to make sure that when it does come, because it will, that you actually have some answers and some protocols, some things to do so that you're not left in the lurch. We've divided this out into two separate webinars. This webinar today is going to be guidelines for you with regard to some practical steps for walking with them. Next month, at the end of February, we're going to continue the same webinar, but go into a part 2 with practical steps for walking with you. Because this is such a heavy issue, oftentimes we need to take care of the caregiver as well. So next month will be about that. But for today, we're going to dive right in to how we can help you actually walk with other people. So some practical things we're going to touch on. I want to ask the question, why are you here? We're going to talk about the current situation here in the United States. We're going to talk about hopelessness and despair in the Bible just briefly. And then I want to give you some warning signs, some dangers, and some risk factors, just so that you have a sense of, even if someone's not coming to you and talking about suicide, some things that you can be attuned to and be aware of. And then actual 5 steps, 5 practical steps that we would ask you and encourage you to take in helping those in crisis, a little bit on mandated reporting. And then I want to leave a lot of time at the end for question and answer. So first, before we dive in, and this is something that we do all the time with our team here at Restoration, is we want to make sure that before we go into some of these very difficult places, that we actually come to a place of recognizing that we have to tether ourselves to God's hope, especially as we are kind of leaning into some places of real deep hurt and danger. And so, and hopelessness. And so I want to just pause for a second. I don't know why you're here, why you specifically are joining us for this webinar today. I'm so glad you are, and maybe you've been touched by suicide yourself in your own personal life. Maybe you have been walking with someone who has walked through a season like that, or maybe you've struggled with it yourself. And so I just want you to pause for a second, and I'm going to pray, and then we're going to dive in. So Jesus, as we talk about these things here today, would you be with us? Would you tether us to your hope? Would you be connected to us and allow us to connect to you in a way that we will continually remember that you are life and life comes from you, and because of you there is reason to live. And especially as we walk through these things with people, would you give us your hope so that we can lend it to others? Okay. Before we go any further, I want to please ask you to get your phone out. To get your phone out and to create a new contact and put this phone number in your phone. If you are ever in a situation where you have someone who is suicidal this is the national phone number to call, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. Make a note of that. Please get that into your contacts so that when you are caught off guard, you already have that in your phone and ready to go. Please feel free to share that as well with as many people as are in your networks and on your teams. All right, so let me share a little bit about the current situation. Worldwide, the United States is number 27 on the list of suicide. There are 26 other countries that are higher up on the list, and out of the 180 some countries, we are number 27. So we are still pretty high up on that list. The way that is calculated is that there's how many completed suicides per 100,000 people in population. So our average is 15.3. Meaning 15.3 people per 100,000 have completed suicide. Also under there, you'll see 26.6 men and 7.2 women. And so they take the 26.6 and 7.2 and average those together. That's how that number comes together. But I want to be clear, it does not mean that attempts at suicide is less for women. It means completed suicides. More women attempt suicide than men actually, but more men complete suicide than women. This is alarming data that I have here, and that is that from in the last 16 years, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in the 16 years that they have data for so far, the U.S. has jumped 30% in suicides. The rise is especially dramatic amongst the girls from 10 to 14. So girls are increasingly struggling with this, but it went up for females of every age group and for all men under the age of 75. So suicidal ideation and suicide rate has just gone up incredibly. And suicide is now the second leading cause of death for all Americans from ages 10 to 34. That is astounding. And so right now, I would love for you to kind of hop on in the Q&A and just let us know, are you currently walking with someone who is in a suicidal season, or have you recently gone through something like this? Has this touched your life and your ministry in some way? We would love to just know kind of where you're coming from in that. So these are alarming stats, right? And it's no wonder that we are starting to feel it more and more and more, both in the counseling center and also in the world of ministry and church and missions. So this is something we definitely have to address. And we've come to this Frontlines and this two-part series right now because you all have been asking for help with regard to this specific issue. So I want to shift over here into, all right, that's what's currently happening in the United States, but has suicidal thoughts and all that been part of human existence? And there are many places actually in the scriptures where there's hopelessness and despair and even people considering taking their own lives. And there's three that I wanted to highlight kind of off the bat here real quick. And these kind of fall into very typical categories of what brings someone to the point of wanting to or beginning to think about taking their own lives. So first of all, we have the overwhelmed Moses, where there's so much going on in life and in the world that we just feel so overwhelmed that it's so crushing that almost we think of suicide or think of dying as a way of escape. And in the scriptures that I have here, he asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you, that you put this burden of all these people on me? I cannot carry all these people myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me." Right? So overwhelmed. And that's what we hear a lot. People are just overwhelmed by the issues that they have in life and the things that they're trying to take care of. I just got a note from someone who's monitoring our Q&A, basically saying that pretty much everyone right now on the webinar right now is walking with someone, which is just astounding. And so I personally want to just say thank you for walking with people. We need you on the front lines. So secondly, here we have grief, right? We have grieving Job. Where somewhere in life there has been something that has happened that is significantly traumatic, and we are experiencing grief. Grieving Job, he says, "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? For sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil." There's Job who's walked through his season of pain and challenge, and he's grieving to the point of wishing that he had never been born. Hey, I do also want to say that all of these slides here are going to be available to you, so you can refer back to them and even walk through them with others, maybe on your team, um, as you go from this webinar. So first we have the overwhelmed Moses. Second, we have the grieving Job. And then third, we have the angry Jeremiah. And he is so frustrated about how hard things are in the world. He says, "Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow and to end my days in shame?" Here we've got Jeremiah, who is so frustrated and angry with what's going on in his world that he has come to the point of like, wow, I wish I'd never been born. I wish I was dead. So I put these here because there's we feel the rise in suicidal thoughts and despair in our world today, and we see the statistics, but I want to kind of couch it in the full spectrum of all of humanity and the history of humanity. This is not a new thing. This is something that has been a part of history for a very long time. And you'll see here the overwhelm, the despair, the anger. I didn't have space or time to go into shame. Shame is another significant factor to people feeling like they come to the point of wanting to end their lives. And again, there's other biblical figures who express the desire. Rebecca, David, Jonah, Elijah, like there's many people who have come to the point of just saying, hey, I wish I was dead. Again, I just want to give you the greater context of humanity. The biggest factor to people coming to the point of this point of despair is depression. And the way that I like to think about depression is that there is some overwhelm, grief, anger that is happening out here in the world that somehow has come to the place of where it's now being turned inward. So the way that I like to talk about depression is that it is anger turned inward, and to where we no longer have the capacity to cope with the things that are on the external, that we have to take them internal in order to cope with them. And that we just can't. We were never designed for that. So depression is really the number one factor. Of course, there's all kinds of other issues that come with that, but that would be the number one reason why people come to the place of despair and begin to think about ending their lives. So a few warning signs. Okay, a few warning signs. And these are things, there's warning signs, there's risk factors, right? There's imminent threat kinds of things, a few warning signs. So if you are walking with someone and you start to see these things on this slide, those should become yellow flags for you, right? Yellow flags that something may be going on that maybe they're not yet willing to talk about, but these are the yellow flags, warning signs for you. So threats or comments about killing themselves, even in passing, right? Like, I wish I wasn't here, something in passing that can become even more overt and dangerous. That there's an increased use of alcohol or drugs, that there's some level of increased aggressive behavior. So either they're powering up in the increased use of alcohol and drugs and aggressive behavior, or they're powering down and they're pulling away from social withdrawal from friends, family, and community. We begin to see like, oh, this person was really happy last night, but they're really depressed today, right? The dramatic mood swings going up and down, talking, writing, or thinking about death. I've walked with people before who have had a whole notebook of either poetry or songs or drawings where it's all about death, and I begun to wonder, okay, this is one of those red flags. And then also a little bit more on that impulsive or reckless behavior, almost as if almost as if they don't care anymore that they live, they put themselves in dangerous situations. So these are warning signs, right? These are warning signs and yellow flags for you that something may be going on with someone. The question then is, after we see those warning signs, is that person in imminent danger? And those previous ones may be yellow flags. These are going to be your red flags. Okay, are we in imminent danger? So first of all, putting their affairs in order, giving away their possessions, saying goodbye to friends and family, writing notes, having ballads that they're writing or something like that, and songs, saying goodbye. Significant mood shifts that before the yellow sign or the yellow flag was mood up and then mood down. Here is where it gets more dangerous, is where those mood shifts stop and they go from a place of despair to calm. They go from a place of despair to calm. And that is the kind of a warning sign that they've just, sorry about that, that they've just resigned themselves to the fact that they are going to take their lives. That is a significant sign of danger. And then finally, planning, possibly looking around to buy, steal, or borrow the tools that they would need, the things that they would need in order to complete a suicide, like, drugs or a firearm or, those kinds of things. So if there is someone in imminent danger, right, that's where we actually have to go into what I call DEFCON 5, is jumping into action on your part. Warning signs are where we start to become worried and we start to have the conversations. Imminent danger is no longer conversations. That's when you begin to act. A couple of risk factors here that I want to share with you. And these risk factors are what might give someone, one person, more propensity to think about suicide than another person. All right, and there's a lot of them here. I'll just read a few of them. A big one is a family history of suicide. Someone who has a history in their family of other people taking their lives. It's been introduced as an option. And from a spiritual perspective, it's almost like a family curse that gets passed down. Greater use of substance abuse. It can result in mental highs and lows that exacerbate the suicidal thoughts. One thing I do want to note as well is that gender identity and or gender confusion also significantly increases the risk factor. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but if you're walking with anyone who is struggling in those areas, it would be a good idea to keep your eyes open and keep a pulse on where they are with regard to their suicidal thoughts. Stress, isolation, someone who has recently gone through a tragedy, those are all risk factors to someone struggling with suicidal thoughts. Okay, so let's, those are just some of the background of where we're at. And I want to talk specifically to all of you about how do we actually walk with people through suicidal seasons. And again, I want to say thank you to doing this. I want to say thank you to being with people who are walking through these things. I am here the founder and director of Restoration Counseling. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and often people will say to me, like, okay, you know what to do. And I want to say, I have ideas of what to do, and that there's no expert in these areas. And so no matter how ill-equipped you might feel, I feel ill-equipped often as well. And so I just want to level the playing field. Like this is something extremely difficult to walk through with people and extremely difficult to even navigate. And every situation is different. But there are some basic patterns that I think could be helpful for you as you're walking with someone. So let's jump in. All right. So according to betheone2.org, or I'm sorry, .com, there are 5 steps to helping those in crisis, all right? And I think the way that they like to talk about it is be the one to ask, be the one to keep safe, be the one to be there, be the one to help connect, and be the one to follow up. Okay, so these are the 5 steps that I think would be best to equip you. Like, what do I do when someone comes to me and they begin to say that they're thinking these things? Here are your 5 steps. All right, so I'm going to dive a little bit further in to what each of these means. And in the midst of this, whoever is using the closed captioning, I just want to say thanks for your patience. Lindsay is doing an awesome job trying to keep up. All right, so first segment is to ask. One of the things I hear a lot from people is, if I ask them about their suicidal thoughts, am I not planting ideas in their mind, right? And the answer is absolutely no. By asking directly, you are actually opening the door and saying, hey, I take your safety serious enough for me to risk asking you, is this where you're at? So I always want to encourage people to ask directly. If there are any yellow flags, if there's any red flags, if there's any curiosity, you hear anything from someone, ask them directly. Please ask them directly. And then when they answer, if anything is of concern to you, if anything is concerned, there are 3 things that we're always wanting to kind of test out and see where the person is with regard to these 3 things. And if you see on the left-hand side of the screen there, it's intent, plan, and means. And I'm going to unpack those in a second. You'll also see a scale on the bottom there, 0 to 10. And so I always ask people, on a scale of 0 to 10, what is your intent? On a scale of 0 to 10, what is your plan? On a scale of 0 to 10, what is your means? So intent is, I actually intend, that's my my thought, is to go further towards or approach suicide more. So someone who's more distant and passive from the idea and is just struggling with some despair or some depression, they may say, you know, I just wish I was never born. But my intent is never to really do anything to myself. Whereas someone that would be more like a 1 or a 2 level. Someone who is higher up on the 10 level is that their intent is, this weekend, I am saying goodbye, right? That is someone who has full intent on committing suicide. And so I ask people, where on that scale are you? And if anybody says between 5 and an 8, I am on alert. Like, we're asking questions, we're trying to come up with some plans, we're wanting to make sure they stay safe, those kinds of things, right? It's still a conversation with that person. I'm asking them questions and we're co-creating some things together to keep them safe. If we go between 8 and 10, anywhere after 8, it is no longer a conversation. And that's where I'm saying I start to take action, whether or not they are willing to participate in their own safety. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So whether their intent is, wherever their intent is, I want to kind of make sure that I know where they are, and I will regularly check in with them and ask again, how are you today? Where are you in your suicidal intent? Are you at a 5? Are you at a 2? Are you at an 8? And that just gives them some responsibility to answer the questions. Okay, plan. Plan is not just this weekend I intend to kill myself, but the plan is, here is how I'm going to do it. I've thought this through. I know that I'm going to use a firearm versus medication. I'm going to, whatever it is, I have a plan and a place and a time, and like, I'm setting the stage in order for this to happen. So again, someone at the bottom end of that is going to be like, I just, wish I was never born. That is still suicidal thinking, but it's not, it's still a 1 or a 2 on a plan. I never plan on doing anything. So that's a 1 or a 2. When we get to the upper ends, I was working with someone who was wheelchair bound, and they had decided that it was going to be at this time of day, at this lake, they were going to ride the wheelchair off this specific dock. because they knew that it would say the wheelchair would cause them to sink and no one is around that dock at this specific time. That is a significantly high level of suicidal plan, okay? So you want to ask about the plan, and then you also want to ask about the means. So the intent is I intend to do it. The plan is I know exactly how I'm going to do it. And then the means is I have the tools necessary to accomplish what I want to do, right? So if someone is planning on shooting themselves, but they don't have a gun, that creates a little bit of a healthy barrier, right? When they have the means, when they acquire a firearm, that is again all the way on the end of the 10 mark, and we need to take action. So we're always wanting to ask intent, plan, and means. And what I'm asking of all of you and all of us who are the caregivers is to listen closely and take them seriously. Don't ignore them, right? Don't ignore them. Help them focus in what they're wanting to live for, if there is anything, not trying to impose your reasons on wanting to keep them, help them stay alive. All right. So that's the ask. The first thing that you do is to ask. The second thing is if there is an immediate need, if the person is not safe right now, like I said, you need to take action, right? And that is your second job is to keep them safe. How many steps towards suicide have they already taken? Do they have access to a firearm? Do we call the authorities or transport to a hospital? And I would say anyone who is in that 8+ range on that intent, plan, and means, you need to take immediate action. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit. Okay, so you need to keep them safe because they are not safe for themselves. If they are below that 8, then keeping them safe doesn't necessarily mean transporting them immediately to the emergency room. Keeping them safe means creating what we call a well-being action plan. And so this is a plan that is co-created between you and the person that helps them take action for their own well-being. It grounds them in a relationship with you, and it helps them think through, okay, when I get to a darker place or a more depressed place, here are some of the things that I'm going to do. It's listed out on this piece of paper. So that well-being action plan is extremely important for you to grab a copy of. And I want to let you know, one of the other resources that we have here at Restory Labs is something that we've called the Minister's Roadmap to Mental Health Preparedness. There's 10 must-dos that you as a minister could do right now in order to prepare for the eventuality of facing some of these things. This is available to you at restorylabs.com. It's completely free. In this, there is a sample well-being action plan, right? So you can just download that and have a ready-to-go well-being action plan that we've created for you so that you have that at the ready if you need it at any point. That's at restorylabs.com. So the first is to ask, right? The second is to keep them safe. The third thing is to be there. Scripturally, biblically, kind of gospel-wise, right? We are, the one thing in the world that is not good is to be alone, right? That was right from the beginning. And so most people who are struggling with suicidal thinking are disconnected from others. They may be extroverted still, they may be doing things, but they are internally disconnected. And so all of the research shows that the number one thing that will keep someone alive is a connection with another human. Connection with another human. So for you to be there and to remove their isolation and aloneness is going to be one of the greatest things that you can offer them. So, and I want to clarify, like there's two parts to this slide, right? There's two parts to being connected. The first is to be connected with you. Be connected with you by being there with them, ground them in relationship and presence. One of the things that I will often say to someone who's walking through a suicidal season is that I would be so devastated if anything happened to you, right? I would be so devastated because they need to hear that their life has an impact on others and that it is important to me that you continue to exist on this earth. And so to connect them to us and maybe be there with them and hang out with them and just spend time around them. However, you can't be their only person. You just simply can't be. There's many people that you're caring for, many people in your congregation or in your organization or whatever. So yes, connect them to you and ground them in relationship with you. But at the same time, you're going to want to connect them to others. And this is part of that well-being action plan, is who are the people in your world that you would like to involve in your well-being plan? Who do you like to connect to? Who are you more connect to? Maybe it's parents, siblings, friends, spouse, church members, pastor, someone like that. You want to make sure that when you aren't able to be there for them, who are the other people that they can go to? So you want to make sure that they are connected and being there. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to connect. And what I mean by this one and what the organization means by this is to connect them to resources, connect them to ongoing support. So one of the things that we are often doing and can do way ahead of time before someone ever comes to us in any kind of suicidal crisis is that we can do the work now to know what the resources are in our communities. What other resources are available around us so that I am at the ready, just like that phone number that I had you put in your phone. What are the other resources that we can connect them to? So help them connect to other suicidal prevention resources, local groups, national hotlines, those kinds of things. And then also ongoing support. Who other than you can be a professional helping person in this person's life, right? Because there's the suicidal ideation that is happening right now, but there are deeper issues that have driven that person to that level of thinking. And that probably is not going to be the kind of work that you are going to do. It's going to be someone else more on a professional counselor level that will help them navigate the underlying reasons for that. Who are you going to, who are you going to have in your emergency list to call when you face these kinds of situations? So find that person now and be ready for that in the future. And then finally, following up. It is important for us when someone comes to us that to walk through 1, 2, 3, 4, but if we just stop at 4 and don't follow up, it's as if they didn't come at all. That's kind of how the experience is. And so to follow up with the person, to touch base with them and continue contact. It does not mean that you continue taking responsibility for their well-being to the degree that maybe you did in the first day, 2, week, month of their suicidal thinking where they came to you with it. But it does mean just a simple phone call or a text or a message. Hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you today? I've been praying for you recently, just to keep the door open for them to come back if they go through a deeper swing of depression, that they always know that they can come back to you. And then supportive ongoing support, or ongoing contact, right? Knowing that someone out there cares is grounding in the kind of relationship that will keep them alive. So those are the 5 things that are recommended for people as an immediate go-to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Just keep these things in mind so that you are equipped to walk with someone through a suicidal season. One question that we often get is, okay, so when do I call? When is it mandated for me to call? And there are a couple different categories of mandated reporting. And if you are a pastor or a minister or a counselor, right, you are a mandated reporter, which means that if you hear this kind of information, it is the law that you must call. You can't get out of it because of whatever reason, you must call. So what we're talking about here today is the imminent threat to self or others. If suicidality or homicidality is at that 8+ level, you have to call. That person is no longer able to make their own decisions to keep themselves safe. And so you need to call. And whether that is calling 911, whether that is getting that person in your car and making sure that they are delivered to the hospital, you have to make the call and report that that's where they are. Another category that we're not talking about today, but is still important for you to know with regard to mandated reporting is child or elder abuse. If you ever hear of a child being physically or sexually abused, or an elderly adult being abused physically or sexually, that anyone who cannot advocate for themselves, it is, and you hear about that, it is your responsibility to call. Finally, if you don't know whether or not you should call, right, you should call. Anytime you don't know, it's not your job to wonder if you should call, you just make the call. And I know that the calling can be extremely disruptive to the person. I know that is a challenge sometimes, even for you. It might feel like you're kind of ratting them out a little bit, but it's not your job to decide whether or not this is sufficient enough of a case, or big enough of a deal. The last thing that you would want to do is to not make the call and then have something terrible happen. So if you don't know, make the call. All right, so I want to just let you know, if you can go to suicidehotlines.com, suicidehotlines.com has a list of stateside or state-based hotline information that you can just hop online and go wherever you're located in the United States. This is going to be the resource listing for you. So go to suicidehotlines.com, and that's a place where you can get information. All right, so I want to move on to some Q&A. All right, here's a couple of the questions that have come in from you, and we're going to try to hit as many as we can before the end of our time today. I also wanted to let you know before we dive into this that this recording is going to be available to you online. So we will let you know where it will be in just a moment. So, all right, the question is, how has technology played a role in the increase of suicide and suicidal ideation? What can we, especially our parents of youth with technology, do to help people toward greater health in light of that influence? That is such a great question. And the reality is that technology has played a significant role in suicide and suicidal ideation. People are hearing about it more and more. So what do we do? Okay, so the first thing that I would say is that we are always having conversations. Remember, the number one thing that was on here was to ask. If we are asking the question, we are not planting ideas, they've already been planted. And I think that we know now with technology as it is, that the ideas are already planted. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share here and just come back to, sorry, something just happened to my computer. Okay, hopefully I'm still on. The issue of technology does play a role. What we can do as parents is to first ask the question. Ask the question of whether or not they've heard about it, whether or not they've seen it, whether or not they've, their friends are talking about it. Talk to your kids about suicide, and by doing so, you will not plant ideas, you will actually help them, and also let them know that you are not going to be surprised if they start to think about these things. You're not going to be overwhelmed, that you are someone who they can come to. So that is very, very important with regard to technology. Okay. There's how to talk to your children about suicide on Christianity Today, that we've talked about. You can just Google that, how to talk to your children about suicide, that my wife wrote several years ago on Christianity Today, and that will give you some really good ideas of places to go and things that you can talk with your kids about. All right, next question. What do you do with a person who had burnt all their bridges with their family, friends, and coworkers? I know you mentioned it needs to be a list of people, but this individual has a tendency to hurt others and ruin all their relationships. So I'm assuming what you mean by that is, what do you do when this person who has cut all ties becomes suicidal, and you're kind of like left in the lurch of like, I'm the only person who is talking to this person? Okay, so first of all, I think you then need to go to some of your friends and your coworkers for yourself. Because if you're in that situation and you're the only one keeping that other person alive, right, that's going to be an overwhelming burden to you. So you need to make sure that you have your cadre of people who are standing with you. But then secondly, I would go ahead and ask other people to stand in on that person's behalf, maybe some of your friends, other people on your staff team, other people in church, maybe some leaders that you can say, hey, this person is talk to me about their suicidal thinking and I need help. They don't have anyone. Can you help me help them? And then finally, the ongoing resources is for you as quickly as possible to connect them to other professionals and other support groups and other services in your area as quickly as possible so that the burden is not completely on you. They may not be friends of this person, but if there are other people that can surround them, that is going to be your best bet, especially when someone is really destructive in relationships. A question we often get is about cutting, right? Is about cutting. So where is cutting on the continuum of warning signs of depression and suicide? Cutting is not suicidal ideation. Okay, and I think they both fall in the category of self-harm, but cutting itself is not suicidal ideation. Most of the time, cutting happens because there is an emotion that the person doesn't have words for, that they cannot express. And so they are wanting to have some way to either locate the pain that they're experiencing emotionally. They need to locate that physically, so they will cut. Sometimes there is shame and contempt that are at play with this. Cutting is not necessarily suicidal ideation. And many times it really is not. So I would say that it falls more in the yellow flag category than in the red flag category. And oftentimes parents will respond with, oh my gosh, my son or daughter is cutting, they must be suicidal. The reality is probably not, but we do need to keep an eye on that. Should you approach different types of depression differently? Attention getting, situational, or chemical imbalance. I work with students every day, and each situation is drastically different in each case. Yes, absolutely. So there are three main categories of depression, and I will do my best to kind of summarize this as quickly as possible. So there is situational depression, which is the person is walking through a season of life that has been challenging. Maybe they've just moved away from home, or maybe they've had a death in the family. There is some situation that is causing this level of distress. If people are suicidal in that space, the likelihood is that they're more on that lower end of the spectrum because it's not just chronically they've not been thinking about suicide, it's more situationally. And so what I would encourage you as someone walking with them in that state, that they would, that you would help them to remember and recognize the other parts of their lives that despite this one difficult situation, that the other areas of their lives still have hope, to reorient them to the other parts of their lives if they're walking through a season of situational depression. Another level of depression is more that like ongoing low level, is just kind of that back burner depression of sadness or feeling down. There's not those ups and downs. There's not those deep depressions. They can function generally in some kind of depression, but they're kind of just down most of the time. And so that's going to be more of someone who will need some kind of medication, possibly some kind of change in venue, like getting out of the season of cloudiness and get to the sun and do some of those things. But that lower level of depression also doesn't generally get to the suicidal thinking because it's just been chronic over time. To walk with someone who is suicidal in that time, again, I think there are 5 things that I recommend you doing that and encouraging them to do in the middle of their suicidal thinking, or if they 5+ on those spectrums. Here are 5 things. They spell out the word spine. Okay, the spine is the core of the body. And so for the S, it is sleep. For P, it is pleasure. For I, it is intimate conversation. For N, it is nutrition. And for E, it is exercise, spine. And so someone who is in that chronic depression probably doesn't have a lot of core, emotional core strength. And so to get those 5 things going is going to help them build their strength. So sleep, making sure they have good sleep patterns. Pleasure is making sure they're doing something that engages beauty on an everyday basis, listening to symphonies, looking at sunrises, painting, playing, cooking, whatever is pleasurable to that person, to introduce that to them on an everyday basis. Um, I is intimate conversation, not just like, general sports and news kinds of conversations, but intimate conversations on an everyday basis. Who can they talk to about what's going on in their lives and in their heart on an everyday kind of basis? N is nutrition. I had one guy who was severely depressed, and he was drinking 2 liters of Mountain Dew a day. Right. And so you can imagine that there was some level of nutritional impact of what he was going through. So the moment that he stopped that level of sugar and caffeine, a bunch of other things stabilized for him. So ask them what, and help them walk through nutrition, and then exercise. Um, the We're always going to feel better when we're moving our bodies, right? And so people who are depressed, that is the last thing that they usually want to do, is to get out of the house, open the curtains, go for a walk. It doesn't have to be CrossFit, right? It can just be get up and go out for a walk on an everyday kind of basis. So if you can help them with spine in that middle category, that would be incredible. The ones that are the other category of depression is those that are either real high and real low, or just real low. They cannot function. They cannot get out of bed. It's for a long period of time that they can't do that. It's been a season of depression that has lasted a good several months. Those are people who are in what's called major depression. And those are people who are really going to need to get significantly connected with a professional. And so for you as a minister, sometimes the best thing that you can do is to make sure that that handoff happens. And then you, like I said, come back to and continue contact with that person, but you just simply cannot carry and walk with those people. So another question was to clarify the roles of who is a mandated reporter. If you are, you're a mandated reporter, if you are a counselor, if you are an ordained pastor, if you are a teacher or a principal or anyone in the education world, if you're a social worker, any of those people are mandated reporters. If you are also serving on an organizational team like crew or navigators or international justice mission, anybody who is representing a Christian religious organization who could be considered in a position of religious authority, you are a mandated reporter as well. I do want to say that each state does vary in some of their laws, but I always go to, if you're wondering if you're a mandated reporter, you probably are, and you should report. Okay. Another question. Also, at what point, when parents don't believe their student after they and myself have spoken to them, do I step in myself to get them help? Just follow the scale, or is it different working with students in the situation? At what point, when neither the parents or the students will do anything, I believe that's what that's asking. At what point do I step in and do something? Yes, if it is an 8+, you absolutely step in. You absolutely need to do something in order to help that person. But I would rather have you blamed for stepping in where no one else would, and helping to save that person's life, than for you to just go, okay, I'm out, right? And I'm not going to step in. So I would much rather have you do that, to step in. And even the reality is, life is worth disappointing someone. Life is worth pissing somebody off, right? And making them angry. And I would rather make someone angry or disappoint them and help save their life than I would to just avoid the conflict with that person and take a back seat. Okay, last question. How can we walk with friends who've had one of their own kids commit suicide? Oh, that question just breaks my heart. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for walking with those friends. To lose a child to suicide is one of the most devastating things a parent can walk through. And so how do you walk with them? The best thing that I can say is your presence. It's not what you have to say. It's not helping them think through solutions. It is your presence. It is your thoughtfulness. It is just being with them. recently, even in our own community here, we've had someone lose a family member to suicide. And really, at the end of the day, there's no words. There's just no words that we can actually offer that will comfort the other person. And so I want to just encourage you to be with that person and to just let them know, hey, I am here for you and with you, and I grieve with you, and I am so saddened by what happened. But really, at the end of the day, there's no words. I just want to be with you. Um, so thank you so much for your questions. A few last things that I want to offer you here as we wrap up for today. So we also have here at Restory Labs a new podcast that we have put out. It's called the Walking With Podcast. If you just search on, in Apple or on any of the podcasting place, the Walking With Podcast, that is going to be a podcast that we are putting together to help you walk with others. And each week we'll be talking about a different topic that hopefully will be relevant to you, to equip you and reduce your overwhelm and replace it with confidence. So there's the podcast that we have there for you. You can also find links to that podcast on restorylabs.com/podcast, and all the information and all the past episodes. We will also occasionally put out free PDFs for you to grab from there. So there's that. In the future, we do have this recorded, and it will be on YouTube for anyone who wants to come back to it and watch it with to review it or bring it to your team or something like that. And then part 2 of this conversation about suicide is going to be at the end of February, on the 27th of February, same time, same place, on the 27th of February. And we're going to be talking about, okay, so this part 1 was all about how you help someone else. Part 2 is about how you hold and kind of walk with yourself as you're walking with others through some of these really, really difficult seasons. So those are a couple of other things. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. The PDF of these slides will be available to you. And again, we love the posture of witness here at Restory Labs and Restoration Counseling. The posture of witness, to us, it is the core of the gospel. And so these things, these issues of suicidality are extremely difficult to walk with someone. However, if you are with them, that is going to make a huge, huge difference. All right. Take care, everybody. We will see you again in a month at the end of February for the next Frontlines. Have a great day. Take care.